nice to have an old Corvette. Oh, that's good.
I'd like to call to order the North Aurora Village Board meeting of Monday, April 2nd, 2018. We'll open with a silent prayer and meditation. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Clerk, call the roll, please.
Mayor Berman?
Here.
Trustee Gavino?
Here.
Trustee Lowry?
Here?
Trustee Curtis? Here. Trustee Carroll?
Here.
And Trustee Gately?
Here.
I have a proclamation. This is for Arbor Day, 2018. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the whole world. And whereas trees reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, they cut heating and cooling costs, they moderate the temperature, they clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees in our city increase property value, enhance the economic vitality of our business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. And now, therefore, be it proclaimed that I, Dale Berman, Village President of the Village of North Aurora, do hereby proclaim April 27th, 2018 as Arbor Day in the Village of North Aurora, and I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. And further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the hearts and promote the well-being of this and future generations on this 27th day of April, 2018, dated the 2nd day of April, 2018.
Very good.
No audience comments. Trustee comments. Consent agenda.
Motion approved.
Second.
Discussion? Clerk, call the roll, please.
Trustee Gavino?
Yes.
Trustee Lowry?
Yes.
Trustee Curtis? Yes. Trustee Carroll?
Yes.
And Trustee Gately?
Yes.
And under new business, item number 1, Mr. Laskowski.
Evening, Mayor and board members. This item is the award of a contract with Lakeshore Recycling Systems for street sweeping. We went out to bid. We only received one bid back on this street sweeping contract, so we did a little investigation to understand why. It turns out a lot of the companies in the street sweeping business are starting to consolidate. So the company we actually had under contract for the last 3 years was bought up by the company that won this bid. To further investigate the prices to make sure that they were valid and that we were getting a good deal, we looked at last year's prices. We found that the escalator, the price between years, for last year's contract was 3%. This year, that escalator has been reduced to 2.5%. In addition, the hourly rate for special event cleanups has been reduced by $2 an hour and is being held constant over the life of the 3-year contract. This contract is a 3-year contract with an option for a 4th. There's $20,000 currently in the preliminary budget to fund this item. So at this time, it'd be the Public Works recommendation to approve the contract with Lakeshore Recycling Systems.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
So we have a motion and
Second.
a second. Discussion? Clerk, call the roll, please.
Trustee Curtis?
Yes.
Trustee Lowry?
Yes.
Trustee Gafino?
Yes.
Trustee Carroll?
Yes.
Trustee Martinez?
Yes.
Trustee Gately?
Yes.
And item number 2, John.
This item is a motion to waive bids on and accept a quote from Solution Technologies for water treatment sludge removal in the amount of $37,700. I want to clarify that we did receive competitive quotes, so we're not necessarily waiving competitive bidding. The reason we're asking to waive bids is because we didn't prepare formal bid documents and plans and specifications for this project. And the reason was because it takes a significant amount of expertise to develop these plans, and staff took it upon themselves to perform that research and work with the IEPA, the Illinois Emergency Management Agency, and contact other municipalities to understand their experience. And based on that the information that they received from those 3 groups, called 4 different companies and requested quotes based on that information. So the company that produced the lowest quote, they came out to the treatment plant, saw the facility, understood exactly what we were looking for, and then presented us with a quote based on the conditions that were actually in the field. So again, this isn't necessarily waiving competitive bids. All 4 companies had the same information, and they all provided us numbers based on that information. It's simply we're asking to waive that formal process in which we advertised the bid and produced specifications and plans for it through a consulting firm. So it's the staff recommendation in this case to award the quote or the project in the quoted amount of $37,700 to Solution Technologies.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? Clerk, call the roll, please.
Trustee Gately?
Yes.
Trustee Martinez?
Yes.
Trustee Carroll?
Yes.
Trustee Curtis?
Yes.
Testing 1,
Trustee
2.
Lowry?
Yes.
And Trustee Gafino?
Yes.
Item number 3, Mr. Toth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Items number 3 and 4 under new business pertain to the 21,000 square foot addition at Abilene Flavors at 194 Alder Drive. The first one being an ordinance granting a variance to allow reduction in the amount of required parking for a property in the I-2 General District.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? They made a great presentation at our
Yeah.
town meetings, and I think everybody understands. The clerk, call the roll, please.
Trustee Gately?
Yes.
Trustee Martinez?
Yes.
Trustee Carroll?
Yes.
Trustee Curtis?
Yes.
Trustee Lowry?
Yes.
And Trustee Gafino?
Yes.
And item number 4, Mike.
Item number 4 is the ordinance approving the site plan for the property at 194 Alder Drive.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? Clerk, call the roll, please.
Trustee Gately?
Yes.
Trustee Martinez?
Yes.
Trustee Carroll?
Yes.
Trustee Curtis?
Yes.
Trustee Lowry?
Yes.
And Trustee Gafino?
Yes.
Old business, I have none. Village President's report. I have a busy day tomorrow. I got from 8:30 to 12 is the Kane County FOCA, Forces of Change Assessment Meeting in Geneva. And at 1 to 3:30, I get to volunteer at the Northern Illinois Food Bank in Geneva as part of the Mayor's Day of Recognition for National Service. And tomorrow afternoon at 4:30 is the reception for Aurora Mayor Irwin's State of the City address, followed over at the Paramount with his program at 6:30, so it's going to be a busy day. Committee reports. Trustee comments. Mr. Administrator.
I have no report tonight, thank you.
Mr. Attorney.
No report.
No fire district. The village department reports. Mr. Hanna.
Nothing tonight, sir.
Mr. Toth.
No report.
Chief.
No report, sir.
And Mr. Laskowski.
No report.
We have no executive session. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned, and the cow will start shortly.
Do you want me to give these to Steve, or do you want to give them to him? Oh, good.
I'd like to call order the Committee of the Whole meeting on Monday, April 2nd, 2018. Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Mayor Berman?
Here.
And Trustee Gavino?
Here.
Trustee Lowry?
Here.
Trustee Curtis? Here. Trustee Carroll?
Here.
Trustee Martinez?
Here.
Trustee Gately?
Here.
I have no audience comments. Trustee comments? And our items for discussion this evening on our Committee of the Whole meeting is, number one is local adjudication. Chief, do you have,
There we go. In your packets, you should have gotten two different things, one of them being local adjudication. Staff would like to start a local adjudication program rather than prosecute village ordinance violations and certain traffic offenses through the court system. Currently, the way things are done is all traffic tickets and some ordinance violations where a subject requests a hearing are being prosecuted either through our village attorney or the King County State's Attorney's Office in Circuit Branch Court. On a typical prepaid $120 fine for a speeding ticket, for example, the village will receive as low as $15 after the money is divided up amongst other entities. The process is complicated even more when a citation is prosecuted in court and a fine plus court costs are assessed. Each time a case is prosecuted in the courts, fines from violations are divided up among several different parties. There can even be as many as 18 different categories that $120 goes to, which is why the village sees so little money from a simple traffic ticket. In this case, I use the speeding ticket as an example. If the village were to switch to an administrative hearing process to adjudicate or settle the violations of village ordinances, many of which are heard in the Aurora Branch Court, they would likely be held locally by a hearing officer. By doing this, the village would receive a larger percentage of the fine amount on each violation. Resolutions to violations will also be expedited, and the types of cases that the hearing officer would hear are basically the kind of tickets we would be issuing would be for non-moving violations, parking tickets, animal violations, administrative tows, and impound, which we currently do that. The way we operate now, officers have to go to court each time a ticket is being contested. This means typically going to the Aurora Branch Court, meaning overtime for the officer or taking them off the street if they are working. With administrative hearings, cases are heard on a specific date at a predetermined facility and officers do not have to appear. This would lower court costs and overtime for the village. Fines from the ordinance violations and tickets would then come to the village and not be divided up amongst all those other entities. Staff received quotes from 3 different vendors for software that allows users to issue tickets, run reports, complete the administrative tow paperwork, track tickets and hearing appearances, collect fines, and send non-paid violations to collections. Basically everything we would need to run the program. I have 3 vendors that we checked into. One company is called DACRA, another is Quicket, and another is MSI. We're seeking to adopt a system for the administrative hearing process using the DACRA software. And the reason I picked them, well, there's several, but they're not the highest and they're not the lowest, but they do operate everything that we would need, and it's a very simple program. We've seen 2 different demonstrations by them, and everything is very simple. It's a click of the button, and these officers are out in the squads, and officer safety is important because you don't want to be constantly looking down, either writing a ticket or down at your computer. It literally is just a click of a few buttons. I haven't written a ticket in years, and when I saw the program demonstrated, even I could easily click through this thing. It's very simple. So some of the other reasons that I'd like to do this is that that we would have convenient hearing times for the people that get the tickets and for anybody that would have to show up. Better compliance, fewer written warnings. We write a lot of warnings, and I've been told by the officers that they would write more of the warnings as tickets, but they don't want to hammer everybody for a $120 ticket, residents in town and stuff, when they could maybe give them a ticket for $50. Warnings aren't necessarily going to give you compliance, but a ticket, and if it's only $50, it'll at least grab your attention, but yet you're not hammering somebody on something. You got the mom driving through town with her kids in the back, and she does something that could be written for a ticket. The officers are probably giving her a warning, whereas now with this case, with the fines being lower, they would probably write her the ticket. It relieves overcrowding in the circuit courts. They can contest by mail or the internet even, or in person. It's an impartial, independent attorney. The officer need not be present. The fine stays in the community. Shift costs for the enforcement from the taxpayer to the violator, and then it saves officer time and money as well. So the Dagger company is based out of Elgin, and there's several local places that use it. Just a few of them are King County Recorder, Kendall County Clerk, Elgin PD, South Elgin PD, Hanover Park, and there are others. That's just a few. So I put down at the bottom, my very last paragraph, some of the amounts, just kind of figured. And I did a conservative guesstimate of what we're looking at as far as the revenue. So, I mean, the main thing is compliance, of course. Then you get the benefit of the revenue. So I have Sergeant Dan Psycho with me here, and he is an end user. He's in charge of a lot of the ticketing and stuff like that. So I'd like him to kind of explain what we do now through the King County Circuit Clerk's office with tickets, and then also the time saving that some of the things that DACR can do would help with.
All right, thanks, Chief. Yeah, basically from start to finish, violators issued a ticket. If they're required to go to court, obviously there'll be a court date issued and they'll have to show. Those are generally more serious offenses, driving on a suspended license, reckless driving, DUI, stuff like that. But what he spoke of, let's use an example of a speeding ticket. It's a non-court appearance required. But if they wish to contest it, then a trial date will be set, either by jury or by a bench. Then the officer would be subpoenaed to court. A lot of times, some of these cases, I've seen speeding tickets continue in the court systems for up to a year and a half, 2 years sometimes. As a matter of fact, I have an officer going to court next week for a ticket that was issued in August of 2017, and it was a speeding ticket. So he's been to court twice already for it. With this new system, that wouldn't happen. These tickets that we want to be able to write are, like the chief said, compliance. The day and the age of officers just not caring and just saying, you know what, you got a ticket, too bad, those are gone. We're getting a different generation of officers who actually have empathy, and they take that into consideration, and that's pretty much the big thing. Next thing is we're on 12-hour shifts, as you know. The midnight officers, they're generally the more aggressive teams that do traffic enforcement, and to have to get up at 12 p.m. after you just went to bed at 7 a.m. after working a 12-hour shift, go to court for 2-3 hours, and then come back to work at 6 can really, take a toll on your health as well as your mental well-being. With this system, that would be almost null and void. But again, that's kind of the nutshell of everything.
One thing I'd like to add too is just to go back to the idea of issuing warnings. I want to make it clear, it's not that we wouldn't issue warnings anymore. What the chief is saying is it's really on those borderlines when you really should give somebody a ticket. There's times where you're like, okay, this is a warning no matter what. And there's other times when you're like, I should give a ticket, but I really don't want to give them the ticket.
Yeah.
So I want to make that clear that it's not that the
Right.
police officers wouldn't issue warnings still. They're just saying that on those fine line ones, they would be more apt to give a lesser fine and actually go through local adjudication.
Right. The officer would still have discretion over everything like he or she does now. It's just that I think a lot of the warnings that I see written would probably be, they would feel more comfortable, I guess you could say, writing something local that would be less than half of what a regular ticket is. And on the opposite of that is officers do still have the discretion to write like a state ticket or a local ticket, which would be prosecuted by our attorney's office as well if they deem it necessary for whatever reason. So it's not all or nothing. They do still have discretion as far as what type of ticket to write. One thing that Dan, I'd like him to explain real quick also is the way we currently do our tickets and how that system is going to be outdated here pretty soon.
Yes. All right, thanks, Chief. Right now we use a system that's supplied by the Circuit Clerk's Office of Kane County. It's called Report Beam. That system is on its way out. We don't have an exact end time, but it's imminent. It's going to happen. It would be like within a week's notice, we're flipping the switch off. And the reason for that is they're going with a new system by Tyler. It's Tyler Brazos. It's a new electronic ticketing system that the circuit clerk's trying to distribute to agencies. We've reviewed it, and it does not do everything that we need it to do. It actually is taking a few steps backwards. So with that, we reviewed it, and we declined to go on board with them. And just so you know, too, we're not just the only agency in Kane County that are saying, no, we don't want to do this. There's many other. In fact, there's only 2 agencies out of the entire county of Kane that are actually going on board with the system. It was supposed to go live June 2017. It still has not gone live, just because some issues at hand. So it's to kind of give you an idea of why we stepped away from it.
What's it called again? From the circuit clerk?
What we're currently using?
No, what they're going to switch to.
It's it's called Brazos by Tyler.
I have a question, Chief. Not to interrupt, but the system that we're talking about now, is it interactive with the DUI part of it as well?
No, the DUIs have to be written on a state ticket, just the same. You could write your ticket on it, yes. Correct? A DUI.
On our electronic ticketing system, yes.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to avoid redundancy, where now we have 2 different softwares to write basically 2 different types of tickets.
Right. We would eliminate the one from the circuit clerk's office that we're currently using, which is going to end anyways. And then with the DACRA, that would take care of any ticket that we would have to write, whether it be a DUI, a suspended, anything local, a speeder, any state ticket, any local ticket, anything that we would write, the administrative tows. DACRA can handle all that. It's made. That's what it's made for, is to write those kind of tickets. Well,
So-
it's electronic. It's electronically
So
printed
DACRA's
out.
just the software.
Yeah, you're correct.
So how much money would we keep if we write an ordinance violation and have it the administrative adjudication as opposed to the on the average $120? I think you said.
If you wrote a $50 ticket, you would get $48 of it. If they went to, that's if they just took care of it, came in and paid it, and was done with it. Because on a $50 ticket, DACRA charges $2 per ticket, so you'd get $48. If they went to a hearing, it would be $46 because they keep for every one that goes to a hearing. Like if somebody shows up for the hearing officer, it's an additional $2. But there's not. I've talked to other departments that do this. They do not have very many show up to those. I talked to one who they wrote over 500 a month, and they'd have maybe 30 people show up.
So $46 or $48, but to go back to the original question, if you wrote a $120 state ticket, how much of that would you?
Around 15 to say 20. Kane County is very difficult to find out how they break it down. I did find a breakdown actually of, I realize it's a different county, but McLean County has like a flow chart of a breakdown. And on a typical, this is a DUI, a $1,742 fine. There's 28 different categories that money goes to before the agency gets their cut. And on a $1,742 fine in McLean County, I realize it's not Kane, they would get, the village would get $352 of that, out of that.
So the DACRA would cover every ticket we write, but the adjudication only covers non-moving violations, the
Right.
administrative hearings.
Correct.
what are we doing? Do we write DUIs on the state ordinance, or do we do it on the local ordinance? Can we
state.
do it on the local ordinance?
We can, yes. We have to adopt all the traffic code, which Ed from Attorney General's office has done a fantastic job of writing those up, and it's pretty much done and ready to be adopted very soon.
So have we haven't adopted the vehicle code as a village?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, one issue with DUIs is that you can't get jail time on a local ticket.
Right.
So that's why a lot of the DUIs get written on state tickets, I think.
Right.
But don't you get more money if you write it on an ordinance violation?
Yeah.
The village keeps more money?
Right. Not that it's a lot.
We're actually molding both issues. So item number 2 on the agenda is it's a separate prosecution for local DUI. That's why we separated them on the agenda. And in that, the chief does a really great cost-benefit analysis in that memo about exactly what we would get fine-wise on a local ticket for DUI. But in this one, just to clarify, what we're looking for is direction on whether or not the village board would like to, the idea of us doing local adjudication for local ordinance violations, and then we would have to have a software system in place. Mind you, regardless, we have to have a ticketing system in place because we either go with the counties or we get our own. Either way, we have to have something.
Right, and I don't really want to take a step back and go back to handwriting tickets for some of the reasons I mentioned earlier. Now you've got, a form that's in, I don't know, there's like 5 copies of it, and you're writing and you're looking down, and officer safety and time. I mean, the time on a traffic stop is probably cut in half or more if you're doing the electronic, and especially if you have multiple tickets, because if somebody gets 2 tickets, now you have to handwrite the second ticket as well, whereas with a system like this, all you do is change the offense and it prints it out instantly for you.
Not to mention that we also have to then, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have to retype that hand ticket into the system back at the station.
Right.
Which is redundant because now we only have 2 full-time people working at our records department and the police department. Now you're asking them to actually enter all the data from the tickets that are being taken. And to the chief's credit, in the first few months of this year alone, the police have really increased the amount of tickets they've written. Now, a lot of those could be warnings, but they're out there very actively in comparison to past years.
So can we,
Go ahead.
go ahead, Morris. So can we combine the code enforcement adjudication with your,
Yeah,
as well?
currently the police department does a hearing out in Sugar Grove for the administrative tows, and then the village has a date up in Batavia for code enforcement. I've not gotten to that point because I wanted to make sure that everybody was on board to move forward with this, but yeah, we should be able to combine.
That would save some money as well.
Yeah,
so,
combine like our system that I'm looking at here with, code enforcement.
Sure.
So.
No, I like it. I think it's good.
That makes sense.
We'll have to look into that. One of the reasons why we do code officer adjudication with Batavia is because one of our part-time code officers is a code officer in Batavia, so she can handle cases for North Aurora and Batavia while she's there. So it might actually be a cost savings to do the code enforcement adjudication the way we do it now. I'll have to double check that. Otherwise, we would have to figure out if one of our code officers can make it to the other adjudication meeting.
If the ticket in the administrative hearing is contested, do we have to have our village attorney or anybody who prosecutes on behalf of the village?
The hearing officer does. They're attorneys who have had special training, and some call them a judge, some call them a hearing officer, whatever it may be. They're the ones that take care of it.
So there's no added cost. We don't have to have an attorney represent us.
No.
I think the biggest savings come in when you say that the officer needs to be present in some of those court dates, because when you said 2 to 3 hours, I believe you're being very conservative. No, I've been to some where they have been a lot longer than that, and there's multiple presentations, multiple dates, and your officer at the end, you pay 3 times the cost of the ticket. Yourself, as a police department, just paying for the cost of your officer.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, to me, having experienced some of that myself, I think it's a good idea. I just anytime that we can save officer time on the courts and putting our records in a better standing, communicating with all the other ones, it's a good decision.
Yeah, I view it as a cost-saving measure, so yeah, I'd be in favor.
We get to keep 40-something dollars of the 15, rather take the 40.
Yeah, I mean, you're paying for the software, but in the end, the revenue that you're bringing in will easily pay for, the monthly fee of the software. And like I said, on my last paragraph there, I've got some numbers, and they're very conservative, and you still come out ahead.
Well, to your point, I think it's good that we can reduce the fines to the actual residents and still make more money than we're making now, even if it's a $50 ticket.
Right.
I just want to comment, Steve, when you mentioned the hours when the code enforcement person is working, but don't they do that at night?
They do. So we have, we do our code enforcement adjudication with Geneva, Batavia, and North Aurora together. We have a part-time code officer who works one night a week and then one weekend morning. So a lot of times we're trying to get our full-time code officers now taking over some of that responsibility. But as of right now, that's something that our part-time code officer has always done for us.
Sure.
So I think she just does it because she handles cases for obviously her full-time position and then her 10-hour week position here. But we can look into, I mean, that's an easy one to just figure out if we can do it or not.
Yeah, where we're going to do it, and then combine the two.
Chief, does this include the same Geneva, Batavia, and North Aurora in terms of those code enforcement hearings? Is this separate from that you're asking for, or is this the same thing?
What that is those are hearings that they hold, and because it is an administrative type, we could, for example, hold any of the local tickets that we write. We could hold them up there, because that basically is the system that's run. We don't go up there for anything. The only thing we do administratively that requires a hearing right now, or a hearing officer right now, are the administrative tows, and we do those out at Sugar Grove.
We didn't want to confuse the issue, but one of the things that we were looking at doing is Chief has already done research on possible prosecutors that we can use, to people that actually hold the adjudication hearings. Correct me if I'm wrong, Geneva is one of the cities that actually does local adjudication now for police issues. And so there is a chance, since we do code enforcement, maybe we can find out when they do their local police adjudications, maybe there is a cost savings. I don't know yet. We haven't gone into that. But when it goes to the board, the intention was that we would present. First, we want to make sure the board is okay with the idea of doing it locally. Then Bill's actually got a very conservative draft number in the budget later, which is why it's on the same meeting tonight. Assuming that is good with the board, it would come back to the board at the village board level for approval of hiring that adjudicator. By that time, whether it's 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever from now, we'll have more information on exactly how we want to do it, when we want to do it.
I mean, technically, you could do it here, right? Right. In the afternoon, like on a first Tuesday of the month, you could do it at 1:30 in the afternoon and do it right here.
Yep, do it here, do it out at Sugar Grove where we do our admin tow hearings. I mean, it's...
We'll just save money combining it with what we already have going on.
Do it up there at Batavia.
For an attorney, so.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds like
I'm all for it.
Sounds good, Chief.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Stichel.
You're welcome.
Item number 2, local DUI prosecution. Chief?
Hopefully this one's a little simpler to understand. So staff would like to start prosecuting DUI arrests with a local prosecutor rather than currently through the state's attorney's office. All our DUI arrests are prosecuted through the state's attorney's office. The assistant state's attorney sets all court dates for the officers who have to testify for each DUI. An officer's schedule is not taken into consideration when the court date is set. Often, several officers will get subpoenaed for a case, and the case will then get continued multiple times, resulting in multiple court appearances for the officer. That is very common. This causes overtime as well as disruption to the officer's schedule, just like Dan was talking about. Another issue by continuing to prosecute DUI arrests this way is that the fines violators have to pay as a penalty get divided up into at least 12 different areas. It significantly reduces the amount of fine money that the arresting police agency gets. Typically, we see an average of about $350 per arrest. If the village were to switch to a system of using a private attorney for local DUI prosecution, the attorney would be able to schedule court dates around each officer's schedule, thereby reducing overtime costs and scheduling conflict. Multiple appearances more than likely would not have to be made, as the attorney typically reaches an agreement on the DUI arrest during the first appearance, which the officers typically don't even have to show up at the first one. The fine amounts also almost entirely come to the village. The amount does not get divided up like it does when the state prosecutes the case. Switching to local prosecution would allow the village to collect fines for violations under the Illinois Vehicle Code. Typically, a minimum DUI fine is $750 and typically reaches a maximum of $2,500. At present, the village sees very little revenue from the $350 per DUI, despite extensive training and manpowers dedicated to the task. That $350 is eaten up just in a few hours of overtime for the officers. In 2017, the department, we made 69 DUI arrests. So I did all the math and figuring there on that last paragraph on the first page, if you consider a 100% conviction rate, and I put last year, or what it would be for last year's amount, and I put it would for last year's amount if we did local. So last year's amount for what we do, and last year's amount for if we were to switch. So you can see the amount down there, that very last number, and that would be before prosecutor costs. So in conclusion, I'm seeking approval to use a local prosecutor for future DUI prosecution. By going to this system, the village can save money on court costs, officer schedules can be taken into account for trials, and more fine money is received by the village. If approved, a qualified attorney will be presented to the board to act as a local prosecutor. I've talked to, there's a couple agencies, one of the closest that does this, while Aurora does it, but a little more similar to our size is Geneva. They do it, and they've been doing it for like 4 or 5 years, and they have nothing but good things to say about it. Basically all the stuff that I said, from the officer schedules, the lack of paying out overtime, and then the fine money all coming to the village. So
I think this is a long time coming. When I was first out of law school, we did prosecutions of DUIs up in McChesney Park and Loves Park, and it was all ordinance violations, and the officers did not come unless we told them we had a trial. I mean, to have them have to go to every single DUI call is just a complete waste of time.
it is, and it can get continued 3, 4, 5 times. 2 years later, you can go back on one, and you could have made 5 or 6 court appearances, and that is not exaggerating. It gets really old for them. And under local, according to Geneva, they're handled right away. They're not strung out, so there's just a huge cost savings.
Because you have your own reserved day, or
Yes.
so it's
Right.
a lot easier.
Right.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Sounds very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Item number 3. Mr. Hanna?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just give me a minute to queue up the budget
Oh, yeah.
PowerPoint. Okay. Hopefully you can see on your monitors the presentation for tonight. As the board is aware, we began our budget process in December. Back on March 5th, we gave an update on this process to the Operations Committee, and we went over with the committee back then some of the things that we're going over tonight. The draft budget was finalized last week. It was emailed to the board members. We obviously were having a committee of the whole meeting tonight. This is our overview. We will have this on the agenda for follow-up discussion and questions on April 16th. Our official budget public hearing is May 7th, and scheduled approval of the final budget on May 21st. So tonight is an overview. Got about 30 slides if you're keeping count. But if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to stop us and ask. Overview of our economic environment that the budget was based on. We still have continued economic growth in the village, a lot of positive indicators. We still have the new development at Randall Highlands with townhomes and a hotel. We obviously have the sale of the old gas station for future development. We have the old Fox Valley Golf Course under discussions. And we had several new businesses and restaurants open during the year. So overall, things are positive locally. We are seeing sales tax revenue growth level off a little bit. We're looking at about a 1.5% increase for next year. As the board is aware, the state reduced our income tax sharing, otherwise known as LGDF, by 10% in the current year. And there's uncertainty as far as what's going to happen in the next fiscal year. So taking that all together, we kind of developed the budget with those things in mind, in the back of our mind. Our budget is $21.8 million in revenue. And $26.7 million in expenditures, a difference of about $5 million. As we'll go over next slide, that's really due to spending reserves in a couple different funds on capital projects. Our budget for the general fund is balanced, $11 million in revenues and expenditures, and about $5,000 in the black. This slide shows an overview of all of our funds. Obviously, our general fund is the main fund here, about $11 million in revenues and expenditures. And we have our various special revenue funds as well. And then our other two major funds are our capital projects fund. As you can see there, we're budgeting about $2 million in revenues next year and about $3 million in expenditures. And then in our water fund, we have about $2.8 million in revenues, $7.2 million in expenditures, obviously because we have some major capital projects that we bonded for last year that we are anticipating getting done next fiscal year. At the Operations Committee in March, we discussed a couple issues that came up during the budget discussions, and we talked about ways to address those in terms of rebalancing some of our revenues. Some of those needs were an increased cost of maintaining our water system, our water treatment facilities, and making our water-related debt payments and coverage ratios. We also talked about funding of general operations and services to the community, some increased costs for repair and maintenance of facilities and infrastructure, and having the resources to continue to make progress towards the goals and objectives of the village board. So we wanted to accomplish these things, but we wanted to do it without ideally raising any taxes or fees. And we also looked at this in the context of the state uncertainty with some state shared revenues like LGDF and corporate personal property replacement tax. So the first thing that we came up with was a rebalancing of our current water and sewer rates. We currently have a water rate of $3.55 per 1,000 gallons and a sewer rate of 0.35 cents per 1,000 gallons. That is the lowest water rate out of all of the surrounding communities that we surveyed, and we surveyed about 12. So in order to rebalance these, we're proposing a water rate of $3.70 or a 15-cent increase, and then offsetting with a decrease in our sewer rate of 20 cents. So we actually have a net decrease in the combined water and sewer rate in the proposed budget of about 5 cents per 1,000 gallons. So we're doing this to, obviously, we talked about before, funding our water system maintenance costs. And we're able to do this because we're completing, or we will have completed, most of the sanitary sewer system maintenance projects, such as lining, televising, and cleaning of our sanitary sewers. And we're able to reduce the rate of our sewer rate. If there's agreement to go forward, this would be effective with an ordinance change and effective with the August issuance of the August bills. The second item that we looked at rebalancing was our telecommunications tax. We currently have a tax rate of 4%, and it generates about $259,000. Of that, 3% goes in the capital projects fund, and 1% goes into the general fund. Again, we looked at other communities, and most communities have their telecommunications tax set at the maximum rate of 6%, and most of them use it to entirely fund operations. So to help us meet our goals with this budget, we looked at a reallocation of this to 1.5% for the capital projects fund and 2.5% for the general fund. The idea behind this is that this would be a temporary change for a two-year period. It would not impact any of the capital funding or capital programs being planned for. And we anticipate that we're going to have some additional budgetary flexibility in 2 years once one of our sales tax rebate agreements is satisfied. So we reevaluate this change and see if we want to go back to the way it was before in about a 2-year time frame once we get to that point and we see what kind of budgetary environment we're in. And just kind of another note as far as that, the general fund has transferred $775,000 to capital projects fund over the last 4 years. So anytime we get one-time revenues or we have one-time budget savings, we've typically made additional pension contributions or contributed to that additional monies to the capital projects fund. So that philosophy would stay in place. And in the event we did have you know, some one-time revenues, in essence, we would consider sending them back to the capital projects fund. So really what this does kind of changes the place where the telecommunications tax money starts, essentially.
I just want to drive home the thought that even with this water rate increase, people will see water rate increase, but once again, it's still going to be the lowest water rate bill that you'll see in the 12 comparables that we looked at. But we're actually lowering people's bills, and this is the first water rate increase in 9 years, but yet we're offsetting it with an actual reduction in your overall bill. So that's a testament of the board and the staff's planning for years and how good our capital program has been, that we can put these one-time revenues in the general fund, from the general fund to the capital program, so we can spend down our reserves on a year like this on major projects that we want to get done.
So just to specify, your increase is being offset with a decrease.
On the water rates? Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
So
the
people
water rate
can
will be
understand that you're not increasing. You're increasing a couple things, but you're decreasing another. So you're
correct.
Still
the
balancing
15-cent
equation.
increase in the water rate is offset by a 20-cent decrease in the sewer rate.
Correct.
So it's a reduction.
Yes.
But it's on the same bill, so it'll come
Yeah.
out as a reduction.
Okay.
Okay. A quick summary on personnel items. We have 3 collective bargaining agreements with our 3 unions, which expire May 31st. So those negotiations are ongoing. We don't know yet what the outcomes of those results and agreements will be. As far as our non-union employees, we've included a 2% adjustment to our salary step schedule and compensation plan. We have health insurance costs that are locked in with IPPC, that's the Intergovernmental Personnel Benefit Cooperative that the village joined last fall. So we have a rate lock with them through June of 2019, and we've actually seen our health insurance costs decrease because of that $20,000 budgeted decrease. We do have 2 staffing adjustments proposed. One is the addition of a part-time accounting assistant and an offsetting reduction in contractual services, so that cost would be about $19,000. And that's really to alleviate some of the workload myself and the accounting manager have, and so that we can focus on some more complex issues and benefit management, especially with the village's involvement now with the IPPC. Also included in the budget is elimination of the administrative intern position and the creation of a full-time administrative GIS analyst. Net cost of that change would be $42,000. That change be done to assist the village administrator and department heads with various projects, research, and also continue to help implement some of the GIS initiatives that the village has.
So just to touch base on that one, the primary function of that position will be obviously GIS and department head assistants. One of the things we don't have in North Aurora is we don't have assistant department heads, but for the police department that has deputy chiefs. Other towns have assistants or other areas where they have someone to take administrative duties to actually do more research, procurement ideas, analysis and whatnot. So grants, special events coordination, economic development assistant, these are all things that we don't get to because we don't have enough staffing to do these things that we want to get done. So what this would do is it actually does 2 things. One, it provides assistance to every single department, whether it's helping John write policies, helping Mike look at different areas and different economic options we have to draft programs. But also, it's offset by the cost that it just happens that our intern, who we'd like to keep, does a fantastic job. He has a geography undergrad degree. He's very interested in GIS. And as you know, we just signed an agreement with the county in which we put last year, I think we had $48,000 in the budget, and that includes storing data with the county for a future GIS system, as well as paying for county employees to do updates to our system. What we're finding is that no matter what, we were always going to have to hire somebody or use our existing staff to collect data to provide the county to update the GIS for us. What we're finding is we can do some of that in-house without having to hire anyone else outside, and then even manipulate that data internally, in which case we may not have to use the county nearly as often as we thought we would to update our GIS system. So essentially, we'd still use them to house our data, but we'll actually see a reduction in costs in using their staff time because we'll be doing a lot of the stuff in-house. So that's one of the things we'd like to get done, and rather than hire somebody, we can get started right away this summer with David going out in the field and actually collecting data.
Okay. A quick note on our police pension funding. This is something that we go over every year. Our last valuation with our police pension fund was 63% funded. And our current fiscal year, 2018, our contributions are $956,000. Those are going up to $1,047,000 next year based on the last actuarial evaluation. As you can note at the bottom, the last 4 years, we've been able to make additional contributions to the police pension fund. We're not anticipating be able to have the flexibility this year to make any additional contributions, but it is something we'll continue to evaluate every year going forward. We still have a net pension liability with the police pension fund, about $9.3 million, but we do have a 100% funding policy, and making the additional contributions has been looked at very favorably by our bond rating agency, Standard & Poor's. So just wanted to kind of update on that. Likewise, on our IMRF side, they do it a little bit differently. IMRF charges us a rate based on the wages and salaries. So we have 11% is the IMRF rate right now. We anticipate that staying about the same, with our IMRF costs increasing to about $251,000 next year. Our IMRF was 82% funded, and we have a $1.3 million net pension liability with IMRF. This is a list of our the major, more significant capital and infrastructure improvements in the budget for this coming year. We have a $2.2 million road program. I've got a map on the next slide to show you where those segments are. We have $95,000 for some drainage improvements over at Juniper and Wildwood. $250,000 budgeted for improvements over here in Riverfront Park, which would include some improvements to a plaza. We have sidewalk reconstruction along North Lincoln Way, north of Oak Street for $106,000. We're continuing the LED light and pole replacement. We're anticipating being able to do 350 lights and 10 poles for $145,000, again using MFT reserves like we did in the current year for that project. We're looking at the reconstruction of the alley north of Oak Street for $233,000. That's the best guesstimate at this time, but that could change based on how that engineering continues for that project. And that's being funded with monies remaining in the North Lincoln Way TIF fund and the capital fund. Silo, we have included monies at this point for repair of the silo, refurbishing, and then moving forward with some sort of lighting on it, anticipating that happens during next fiscal year. We have the Marvel John parking lot construction. Again, we have a rough estimate about $250,000. That could change and go down as the engineering on that project continues. And that's also being budgeted out of the Route 31 TIF fund, both of those projects. Obviously, we have our construction of our 2 new deep wells, Well 8 and Well 9. Combined construction costs remaining probably about $4 million. And we anticipate construction of the water tower starting next fiscal year, $500,000 out of a $1.8 million project. So any questions on any of these that John and Steve can ask?
Well, I'm going to go through really quick and just touch base on a theme here. So once again, we budget conservatively. So a lot of these numbers you're going to see most likely reduced. So what we did here is I'll start with the road program. we're evaluating, we added a segment of road into the road program on Oak Street that may or may not go forward. We wanted to see what kind of pricing we get for it because it was at the cusp of whether we should do it this year or we can hold off a few years. But because we're building out roads in that neighborhood and the rest of Oak Street was done all the way up to that point, we felt it was important to see if we can get a really good price on it this year instead of budgeting it by itself a couple years from now. So that's in the first one. As you go down the Riverfront Park improvements, Bill touched on it, it includes the plaza area. It's really what that is if you remember, we did a landscape plan, a master plan of what we'd like to see in a Riverfront Park. This would include an entryway off the parking lot into the park. It would include reconstructing or doing work to the bridge over the spillway that is in need of some refurbishing, including putting a railing around it that's more compliant with current codes, as well as more decorative. Connections to the existing path so people from the Fox River Trail can actually come off the trail to a seating area where we would have some decorative pavers or something. We haven't designed any of this yet. This is just the concept ideas that were brought to the board probably last year and a half ago. Would include some seating for when we have things like the concert in the park or the 4th of July fireworks, and then ballards at the entrance to the park so that once we have people enter there, we'd like to make sure that cars don't have the ability to drive into the park. So that's on that. The LED lighting, that's once again coming out of MFT. If you recall, we originally budgeted this project was going to be a 5-year project roughly. The pricing on LEDs is much less than we thought it was going to be, so we're actually doing them at a faster pace, and we're doing it we're drawing down reserves in our MFT funds, so we have more than adequate funds to do this. The reconstruction of Oak Street seems very high for an alley. John is literally working on it this morning. We talked about it after our staff meeting. Currently it calls for things like curb and gutter. It calls for lead service abatement. So there's some water construction in that project as well. So the amount seems high for an alley. The alley is in deplorable condition and needs to be fixed. It is an access way for people to get to certain housing and for the fire district to access certain buildings. So we are looking at that, but would expect that will drop in price. The silo refurbishing, last time we talked, we threw a very large number at you from what the designer of the silo project said it might be. Once again, that project is just before we've done any value engineering and come up with options to even show the board. Since that meeting, we've already talked to the designer. We have a meeting set up this week with the company that actually did the structural analysis of the silo. They didn't have their structural analysis done before that estimate even came out. So we're going to meet with them tomorrow just to find out how much more we can reduce that cost if possible, and before we even start moving forward on engineering plans for that project. So that's pretty much it. Just wanted to make sure these are all just rough conservative numbers that might actually be reduced.
And like I said before, this is a map of the general locations for the road program. Oak Street and then White Oak going north into Orchard and those areas up there. And Juniper. Quick summary of other capital equipment and vehicles. This current year, we began the replacement and change out of the Caprices with Ford Explorers, so the budget proposes that process to continue to replace 5 more police squads. 4 of them are 13 or 14-year Caprices, and 1 is also a 2007 Expedition. So the $224,000 includes all of the changeover costs and other equipment to bring that vehicle into service. With that change, there would only be 1 Caprice left remaining after these 5 were purchased and implemented. We have 2 6-wheel dump trucks. One of them, the oldest one, is a 1999, also known as Big Red. It's had a lot of repairs over the years and a lot of Band-Aids to try and keep it going. And right now it's gotten to the point where it's really past any useful. It broke down again. I don't know the exact details of it, but the budget proposes that we purchase a new 6-wheel dump truck for $200,000, rough estimate. And that way we would be able to reduce some of the wear and tear on our other 6-wheel dump and extend the useful life of that vehicle as well. We do have a water division truck that is proposed to be replaced with a new utility truck for $36,000. We have police squad cameras, which are well beyond their useful life. I think there's, what I heard this morning, there's two out of service right now. So parts are becoming difficult to get to maintain those. So the budget would replace all those police squad cameras, and we would use any available DUI funds that we have, which are restricted for certain types of purchases, to help fund that. Also looking at replacing the in-car police radios. Again, the age on wear and tear on those has gotten pretty bad. So the budget would propose replacing those with separate UHF and VHF radios. That would also improve some interoperability with Village of North Aurora staff and other agencies. So Chief or Sergeant can expand on that if needed. And we also have about $53,000 in computer servers, various other computers, multifunction devices, and other items up for replacement out of the Vehicle and Equipment Fund.
And on this list, I just want to touch base on a couple things. Going to the squad car cameras, as we said, two are out of service. We're trying to use the DUI funds to pay for this. We actually did find a grant that we're going to see if we can apply for in time. That might also save us money that we don't even have to spend, hopefully. Also, we did look at other vehicles. There was one, if not two, water trucks that we pushed off for replacement that were due this year. We held them back, and we're repurposing one of the Caprices instead of buying another car to replace one in investigations. As far as the six-wheel dump truck, I'm just going to touch base, and John's got way more notes than I do on this, so he can jump in. But ultimately, here's what I wanted to go over. So the six-wheel dump was up for replacement. It's 20 years old. It has about 210,000 miles on it. It is a dump truck we bought used over a decade ago, if not a decade ago. And it doesn't plow, so it's not set up for a plow, which is another expense to add a plow and add the chassis to support it. So what we've used it for is basically just for hauling. And I'm not going to bore everybody with details, but a six-wheeler versus a five-yard, we have 5 or 6 five-yard dump trucks and one six-wheeler. A six-wheeler holds about 40 to 50% more of a load than a five-yard does. So anytime we have a water main break or anything like that, we use the six-wheeler, the backup truck, if you will, to come out so we can haul away more, so we don't have to have more guys shifting in and out with their trucks. That was up for replacement. It broke down again a few weeks ago. So when we looked at that, rather than replace it with another used six-wheeler, we had another five-yard that was up for replacement this year. What we decided to do is keep the five-yard in service, not even look to replace it, just keep it running for a few more years, and put the six-wheeler that we currently have that's used for plowing right now, use that as the backup six-wheeler, so that we now have a backup truck that's in way better condition that can also plow in the wintertime, and then buy a new six-wheeler. So you're saving the cost of putting off the five-yard, and whatever money we have budgeted for another used six-wheeler, we're now buying a new six-wheeler. But then what I'm saying is we also have the ability to use that plow if one breaks down in the wintertime, and we have the ability to replace in a normal snowstorm, assuming that all our trucks are running, which for the most part, knock on wood, they usually are all in good condition to run during the plowing. We'd be able to reduce a truck that's currently done by a contractor, so we'd save money as well on that. So it was going to get replaced anyways. That's why we said it was a better idea to bring the six-wheeler up instead of having one, keeping two in rotation. That's a lot of information to throw at you, so if you have any questions, please let me know.
One other note at the bottom of the slide there, we're also looking into document management systems and integration. We're not sure if that's going to be something that'd be part of this upcoming budget, but it is something that we're also looking into. Quick note on our outstanding debt. As of May 31st, 2018, we will have about $13.1 million in total debt outstanding. We have principal payments on that debt next year, about $1.38 million, 2.6% of our EAV. The dark line here is actually the library debt that we're responsible for levying and making the payments on. We have 3 more years on that, and then that would be no longer something that the village has to levy for and remit. So right now, the annual debt service on that's about $540,000. So that's about $100 on the average tax bill once that's finally retired in 3 years. The middle light blue line, that's the debt related to the police station. That's funded with sales tax revenue. And the green on top is water-related debt. And obviously, we issued the bonds last year, so that's why you see the increase in the outstanding debt last in 2017. We're still maintaining our AA plus bond rating, and we still have a very good amortization of all our outstanding debt.
Isn't the police station the green and the, according to the code up at the top?
I'm sorry, you're right. I made a mistake. Those colors are too similar to each other. You're right. Yeah, I had that backwards. So as a reminder, the police station debt's paid off with sales tax revenues. Just a few other items. We're continuing GIS implementation with the county for $40,000. It took a while to get the agreement going and in place, but they are hosting the data now, and that continues funds in the budget there. As Steve alluded to, we may not actually use the county that as much as anticipated, but for certainly there will be costs associated with them hosting our GIS data. We still have $15,000 for marketing various development studies. We have some improvements proposed to the Village Hall PD HVAC systems. One is the replacement of some of the equipment over at the PD. Another part of it is implementation of better controls so that the Village Hall and the police station are under the same sort of monitoring system. Obviously, we're continuing parkway tree replacements as necessary and our sidewalk leveling programs as well. We alluded to the sanitary sewer fund. We anticipated getting to some of that televised including this year, but it looks like it's all going to be done next fiscal year, so that'll be 258,000 linear feet of sanitary sewer lining cleaned. The cost $362,000. So even when we complete that project, we'll still have a substantial solid reserve in that fund to address any unanticipated expenses. As we just discussed the implementation of DUI prosecution and local fines. Very conservatively included some numbers in the budget. So we're going to take, as both things were kind of working in tandem at the same time. So if things develop where we're able to tweak those a little bit, we will. But we did include something in the budget for that, those changes.
And that should be pointed out that the $60,000 for tree replacements is back to a normal level. It's been that way, I believe, for at least the last 2 years, and that's because of how aggressive the village was with eradicating almost all. There still are some, but almost all of the ash trees that we had in the parkway over years, where we were budgeting several $100,000 a year to get rid of them. So that was important to note. And then the other thing is we already got quotes back for sidewalk leveling. That's actually going to come to the village board at the next meeting, and they're significantly lower than $30,000. So we already seen some savings there too.
Really quickly, our general fund, as the board is aware, we have $11 million in revenues and expenditures next year. Revenues come primarily from sales tax, income tax, and property taxes. And as you can see, primarily funds police, public works, and general government village hall type services. I mentioned our EAV a little bit ago. We just got our numbers in from the county, so our taxable EAV is back over $500 million, $504,256,743, so that's a 3.6% increase over last year. Our new construction was about $2.2 million in EAV, and as a reminder, if you want the estimated actual value, take the EAV numbers times 3. So we had roughly $6.6 million in new value construction last calendar year. So when you take into effect new construction, we had about 3.1% increase in the average EAV for current property in the village. This chart just illustrates the total general property tax dollars levied and extended by the county. That's this one bar up here. And the dark blue down here is the bonds and interest on the library. As you can see, the tax rate is going down over the last 3 years as the EAV starts to come back, and as EAV increases are higher than the CPI factor for property tax levies. With the last levies we did in 2017 to be collected last year, we still anticipate about a 3.6% decrease in property tax revenue left to pay general fund operations after allocations for pensions. Sales tax, we mentioned before, we're looking at a little bit leveling off of revenue. We're projecting about a 2.2% increase this year and 1.5% increase next year to $4,750,000. Of that amount, roughly $770,000 gets rebated for various sales tax rebate agreements. On our income tax revenue, we had a decrease last year, and we're looking at another decrease this year, about a 1.7% decrease, which is actually better than we anticipated since the state decreased the LGDF sharing by 10%. And that decrease on a monthly basis ends in June of 2018. We still have some uncertainty with next year's budget. Added to the uncertainty is the fact that income tax revenue is extremely, varies month to month significantly. It's very hard to predict. So in discussions with Steve, we decided to take a conservative approach with it and budget some increase around 4.7%, knowing that it might be higher, but it could also be lower depending on what happens. So we've taken a slightly more conservative approach with it than we usually do. Last general fund revenue item, just to quickly note, is on building permits. As you can see, we budgeted $225,000 this current year, and we're budgeting the same for next fiscal year. Obviously, that can change if certain developments, one-time revenues come in, but right now, we feel $225,000 is a good base. Anytime we have like really big years, as we've done in the past here, we consider those one-time revenues, and per our financial policies, we'll consider making pension contributions or transferring those to capital projects fund. So this is our general fund revenues and expenditures over the last 5 years. As you can see, in the current fiscal year, we're anticipating about $10.63 million in revenues and $10.658 in expenditures. That's about a $28,000 gap between revenues and expenditures, which is pretty good considering that includes not only the LGDF reductions by the state, but the use of some reserve funds for property acquisition. So overall, it was a good year so far. As you can see, in fiscal next year, 18-19, we have $11 million in revenues and expenditures. This shows the difference between revenues and expenditures over the last 5 years. As you can see here, the current fiscal year was about $28,000 of expenditures over revenues. That's our best guess projection at this point. It could wind up being in the positive, but again, with 2 full months left to go and a lot of uncertainty with certain revenue sources, it's hard to make good solid predictions at this point, but that's our best guess. As you can see, this line here also shows our general fund balance. We're looking at about 65% at the end of this year, and with the budget as proposed, it would be 63% fund balance at the end of next year. Our policy requires 40 to 50% fund balance, so we've exceeded that policy. And in conversations I've had with Steve, we feel pretty comfortable trying to maintain around that 60% level. Really quickly on our TIF fund, you can see the graph here shows our Route 31 TIF district increment that we received over the years. We just got notice of an increase in the increment from $385,000 to $493,000 to be received next year. As the board is aware, that's property tax dollars coming in due to EAVs rising over and above the base value. So we have approximately $1.45 million in Route 31 TIF fund balance at the end of the current year, and that's to fund some of those projects that was previously discussed regarding the silo and the Marvo Street parking lot. We still have ongoing discussion of infrastructure projects to fund with the TIF, which has about 7 years remaining life on it. This is our capital projects fund. So the line right here shows our capital projects fund revenues. It really varies. We have about $1.7 million in utility tax revenue and non-home real sales tax revenue dedicated to the capital projects fund, and the rest comes from either one-time contributions from the general fund or impact fees and some other sources of revenue. And so this line up here shows our road program and other capital improvements, and as you can see, it really varies year to year based on the road program for streets selected and other capital projects that were approved to be done out of that fund. We're anticipating our reserve to be about 1.7 million after next fiscal year, which we're comfortable with. We like to maintain around 1.5 million for cash flow purposes and unanticipated projects. So I think, as Steve alluded to, I think some of the costs are going to come down. We're not actually going to be spending close to $3 million next year in capital projects, but the numbers should be lower, a little bit lower than that. Quick note on our water revenue. We've seen some sort of flat or declining revenue sources or revenue coming in over the last couple of years. Even when we have new construction added and increases in population, a lot of that due to mild weather, changes in water use by customers, and people getting more efficient with their water use. As we already talked, we got the proposed rate increase from 355 to 370, so that's why we're seeing a 3.8% increase in water revenue next year. And as we said before, that would basically be a total water sewer rate decline of $3.90 to $3.85. One more slide on the water fund here. This just shows revenues and expenditures over the last few years and then projected into the future. As you can see, we received the water bond proceeds last year, and we're anticipating spending the bulk of them in fiscal 19 and fiscal 20. And after that, we anticipate getting to a point over time where revenues and expenditures would be roughly in balance. One note, we are continuing to analyze water main replacement. The village has done a very good job replacing water main over the years. There are still some areas that need to be discussed, such as Route 31, backyard water main, and some other areas in the villages. So those discussions will be continuing to be held in the future. And really quickly, other funds, some notes here. Our motor fuel tax fund, we're still using that for road salt, crack filling, and street lighting maintenance programs in addition to the LED replacement. We're looking at revenues about $460,000, and we're estimating about $800,000 in reserves after next year. So we still have a healthy MFT fund, which also could help supplement our road program, or if we have a share of a road program through SDP funding. Our liability insurance fund, we have pretty stable costs with IML RMA budgeted next year for $305,000, which is a 4% increase over last year. Our tourism fund, we have our hotel taxes estimated to increase to $58,000. We also run all the North Aurora Days revenues and expenditures through that fund, and there's no subsidy for any of that from the general fund for any of the direct costs. On our SSA funds, we reapproved the mowing contracts, which were higher with the recent bids. So I'll be looking at considering the increased levies in 2018. As we alluded before, we have the Sperry TIF and the North Lincoln Way TIF funds as well. Those funds, there's about $55,000 in the North Lincoln Way TIF and $12,000 in Sperry TIF, which could be used to help subsidize some of the capital projects that are being considered with the alley and anything else that might be eligible in the Sperry TIF fund as well. And the sanitary sewer fund, like I said before, we anticipate having a reserve about $1.2 million after completion of all the televising and cleaning projects next fiscal year. So that is our overview of draft budget. Like I said before, we'll be compiling a summary of any changes to the draft budget. Sometimes those come from staff. Obviously, it could come from the board. We'll have follow-up discussion in 2 weeks at the next committee of the whole meeting. If there's any questions prior to that time, feel free to let Steve or myself know. We can address those. Our official public hearing is May 7th, and we're scheduled for a final budget approval on May 21st. So with that, if there's any other further questions or comments, Steve and I would be happy to answer them.
Questions, additions?
I have none.
I want to thank the department heads and Bill especially. It takes a long time to put the budget together, several months. We started about 3 months ahead. Department heads put in a ton of input, but Bill obviously puts it together, and he and I meet with the department heads. We go through all the discussions, but it's a long process and it takes a lot of effort. So nice job by the staff and by Bill to put it together.
Well, I agree, and I think, one of the things that's so great to sit here and listen to our budget and listen to what we're going to spend our dollars on and what we determine we need to. There's nothing left out. There's nothing that we haven't, that we want, that we haven't covered. I think we've got a great plans for replace our water mains and our roads in the future. I think we could do a fantastic job on the way it is, and I don't see anything that we really feel we need and that we've left out. So it's a fantastic job of putting it all together, and a fantastic job of planning on part of not only the staff but our entire board, truthfully. And I think it's something really to be proud of. It really is. So.
Well, there's a lot that has been done and will be done. I mean, you're talking about new water towers, new vehicles, new, security systems, cameras for the police department. Everything has been changing. So, and I think it's being well managed at this point. Everything is being conservative in a way without going overboard. So, thank you.
Thank you. As an administrator, I'm kind of a local government nerd at times, and I'll just say it. But, I look back and I say, you haven't raised water rates in 9 years. You took on $6 million in debt to put in water infrastructure improvements, yet we're still actually lowering people's bills and keeping the lowest water rate in this area, even with doing all that work. And how many towns can say they can do that? So we're in a really good position, and it's something I think we're all proud of.
I fully believe that the efforts of the village board and our entire staff, police department, and everything is that it's appreciated by the community, and I really feel that way. And not that somebody comes up every day and tells me how great a job we're doing, but I just feel that it is appreciated. And I know I'm proud of our community, and thank goodness you've done a fantastic job, Bill, and the entire staff. So thank you.
And by the way, I saw the guys assessing the sidewalks the other day. It was nice to see them out there.
Anything else? No other comments? Nope. Motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? We're adjourned.